Welcome to the Center for Innovation in Campus Mental Health's Conversations Over Coffee video series. We have here today Amanda Neilson from Algonquin College, and she's the harm reduction consultant here. So today we are going to be talking about harm reduction, you guessed it. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be a part of this.
Thank you. So, harm reduction, the word itself is becoming quite a bit of a buzzword in the sector, especially, October 17th coming up. So I am curious, like Algonquin College, you guys have been quite a bit of a champion in the last couple of years for harm reduction. So tell me a little bit about what you guys are doing, if you guys are doing anything different from other campuses.
Okay. So one of the
sorry, can we restart because I was looking away. Okay, restart.
So harm reduction, we use harm reduction every single day in our lives. The example I like to use is driving. Driving is a very high risk activity. Not only are we having to make all these decisions to keep ourselves safe, but we're driving around with everybody else. So we're taking a high risk activity, and instead of saying no one should drive because you might get hurt, we put in airbags, we put in stoplights, stop signs, we have laws, we have speeding limits, we have training, we have all sorts of information on how to drive well, how to drive safely. And so when you think about that, harm reduction is something that is ingrained and is not just about substance use. And so to have a better understanding that, okay, this is how we operate to keep our whole population as safe as possible, it becomes less of a buzzword and more of like, this just makes sense.
Okay, so harm reduction itself has been around since the 70s, and so it's something that came out in the 70s and 80s, particularly to talk about the AIDS epidemic and trying to keep people as safe as possible. So it's well researched. It is an effective way of decreasing communicable diseases and other issues by meeting people with where they're at. So when the Umbrella Project came to be in 2015, we looked at what was the research, what did the research say? So not only did we research harm reduction, we also researched what are the best strategies when working with youth, particularly 18 to 24, which is the majority of our students here at Algonquin College, as well as post-secondary institutions, what's been happening across North America and other places. So for us, it was really about what harm reduction brings is this idea of meeting people with where they're at. It is the idea of not wasting resources and time and energy in trying to create a drug-free campus. There's never been a drug-free campus. There never will be a drug-free campus. And how do we engage students in being able to feel like they have some power and control over their health and the decisions that they make with it. So for us, harm reduction has been the foundation of our whole framework.
And what made, why the focus on harm reduction here at Algonquin, instead of any other strategy?
Harm reduction, as I've said, harm reduction provides the most opportunity for people to make different choices for themselves. Because the nice thing about harm reduction is that it's not about not using. It's not about thou shall not. And it's interesting because as we've grown up, starting from the time that we were little kids, we learned drugs are bad, just say no, don't do drugs. And so how that ends up getting interpreted though is over time is, first of all, if you do drugs, if drugs are bad and you do drugs, then you are bad. And we see how that impacts family. If drugs are bad and you do drugs, then you're bad, and then your parents must be bad. And there's a lot of secrecy that happens and a lot of not talking about it. If I believe that what I'm doing is bad, I don't want to go to you as a health professional or a counselor or my teacher and go, yeah, so I'm doing this thing, for you to turn around and be like, well, stop it, what you're doing is bad. We recognize that when people are using alcohol and other substances, that it's doing something for them. For the most part, students are going to are going to use alcohol and other substances, and it's not going to interfere with their relationship to themselves, their relationship to other people, their ability to succeed in school and work. And for some students, we know that for lots of reasons that are beyond their power and control, that it affects them. It meets a need that they haven't originally been able to find. So I often talk about the idea of so students are human beings too. And
they are?
What?
Shocking.
So this idea of it's about being human, our human needs of love, belonging, acceptance, achievement, identity, freedom from pain. One of the things we don't talk about in our society is that drugs work really well. And by drugs, I'm always including alcohol. They work really well to meet those needs. And so when you think about college and university, you have students who are coming in from all over the place, who don't necessarily know people, who may have mental illness, may have learning disabilities, and are walking into a culture that says, wow, if you're going to college, if you're going to university, like everybody drinks and everybody parties. And what we've discovered in our last, number of years is that that's not true. That's not true. But to understand that when people are using and it's causing problems, it's typically because whatever it's been doing for them is working for them. And to not do it means like, well, how else are they going to get that love, get that belonging, get that acceptance? So harm reduction opens up the conversation because harm reduction supports everybody. So it supports students who don't use by, first of all, recognizing that they exist. And that's a huge part because the perception of college and university students is that everybody uses. And we know through the National College Health Assessment that that's not true.
And there was that interesting discrepancy between the perceived use and the actual use, right?
Yes, huge. And so to be able to put out messaging to challenge, and so we use social norm marketing as a way of challenging students' perceptions around that, creating space that challenges the campus culture norm of substance use. We also support students who are using on whatever level and on a number of substances. So the Algonquin College Umbrella Project has always been talking about cannabis, always been talking about MDMA, always been talking about hallucinogens. We talk about all the substances. What we know through research and my experience as an addiction counselor is it's not about what drug is being used, it's about the impacts. So we have these great pamphlets. They're safer use alcohol, safer use drinking, safer use tripping, safer use cocaine use, safer use MDMA, safer use cannabis, I think I said that. But we have those out on the table. Instantaneously, we've created a space where students feel more comfortable talking about it. And when that conversation is opened, then we can give them accurate information. We can give them credible information. We can provide them with, hey, if you're going to use, think about not mixing, whether that's not mixing your alcohol, not mixing cannabis and nicotine, maybe it's not mixing cocaine and alcohol. We can talk about how, having a plan of how are you going to get home, who are you going to hang out with, how much money you're going to have. And so this conversation, then we get to be able to transfer all this information because we've made it safe to talk about it. When we don't use harm reduction and we work from an abstinent model, it's too black and white.
It's all or nothing.
It's all or nothing. And so that leaves, that has expectations on post-secondary students that we don't even have on our work or at our anywhere else. We live in a alcohol-loving culture. We very much, alcohol in particular is a drug that's ingrained in our society. That's how we celebrate, that's how we mourn, that's how we mark occasions. So this idea of expecting post-secondary students to somehow be not part of the main culture is completely unrealistic.
So you raised several different really excellent points there, and I'm gonna slowly go down different avenues. One is, tell me a bit more about the social norms marketing that you're using. So what is that? How's that working out?
So we have a Think Again Thursdays, and so this is what we do on social media. And so what we take is we take information from the National College Health Assessment. So we participated for the first time in 2016, and we look forward to participating in 2019. And we looked at the Ontario information, and so that idea of think everybody is using pot. Think again. You know what? I think it's 86% of students haven't used in the last year, right? So taking that information and just having them see the stats around it, because there's been so much talk about opioid use. So it's like, concern that everybody is using opioids. No, it's 1 in 100 students, and then we have a picture with that. And so social norm marketing isn't about don't do this or don't do that. Social norm marketing is about aligning, yes, we know that this is what people generally think, and here's information that contradicts that. To be able to challenge some of the perceptions and to create just a little space or a little seed of thought to maybe think about it differently.
Yeah, that's amazing. So what sort of reactions do you get from your students when they see like, oh my God, this is actually what is happening?
Particularly with the cannabis, the perception versus use. So 18% of students, post-secondary students in Ontario, said that they had used cannabis in the last year. And people are like, no, that's not true. Even students who don't use themselves are like, no, it's not true, it's impossible. People are underreporting. And I'm like, okay, so let's double the number. Right? We got 36. That's still not, I think it was 86%, students believe 86% of students are using pot, when actually it's only 16%. So I'm like, okay, double it, 36, no, okay, well, quadruple it, 72%, that's still not the 86%. So having them kind of think of like, that's a lot of underreporting, right? Considering, and it's not to say that there isn't a little bit underreporting. That would be probably realistic, but oh my goodness, the perception and the reality is just so different. And so I think that that's a big part of having students just know that they can come from a place of not using and belong at post-secondary.
Absolutely.
That there are lots of people on campus who don't use. I always relate it back to, again, our need to belong. If there's a party on Halloween and I believe everybody's going to have a costume, and I hate Halloween, I hate dressing up, but I feel like I'm going to be the only one, chances are I'm going to look at simple costumes. I'm going to go to the convenience store and buy Smarties. I'm going to put Smarties on my pants, and I'm going to go as a Smartie pants, right? Like just because.
You know what? I love that.
Right? Because nobody wants to not belong. And I could go on a whole rant about peer pressure, but that's and so the same idea is, if I absolutely love Halloween, but that party just happens to be on Halloween, and I don't believe anybody's going to show up, then that's going to might influence. Even though if I have this most amazing unicorn, right, costume, I may not participate in that. And so it's not to say that it's the group that dictates it's not the peer pressure that the individual has no choice. It is the idea, though, that influences. And so we want to challenge that culture.
Yeah, absolutely. So the other thing is, how do you address sentiments that come up saying harm reduction, by giving people information about safer use, you might encourage that use, or like that comes up sometimes.
All the time. It comes up all the time. The idea, if I put into your hands how to use marijuana safer, that you're going to go, this is a fantastic idea. I've never thought about using marijuana. I think I'll go out and use it. And so there's no evidence that is true. There's no research that is true. If I give all the students pamphlets about safer cannabis use, the only students who are going to use are the ones who are already using, except they're going to use safer. When I'm speaking in crowds, I'm like, if I brought safe crack pipes for everybody here, the only people who are going to use them are the people who are using crack. Everybody else is going to pass it on to that person or throw it away. So we're looking at being able to increase the health of students who are already using. And so the myth that harm reduction makes people use is just, it's just not true.
Unsupported.
In fact, what it does is it opens up, as I said, when we have those pamphlets on the table, I have students coming up to say that they've never used. I have students coming up to say that they had problems with it, and they were able to get some supports around that. I have students who come up and go, oh man, see, I told you couldn't, like holding your breath doesn't make you higher. And so we know that the right information is getting to people, and people, that opening up conversation, right? So what it does is it doesn't increase use, it increases conversation.
That's great. That's a great point. How are you approaching harm reduction for cannabis? Are you doing it any differently from, well, I mean, just thinking about like, you know, the changing landscape now, are you doing it any differently from alcohol? Are you doing it any differently from tobacco? Or is it just absolutely the same approach?
We're absolutely looking at it as the same approach that we've been doing for the last 3 years, going into our 4th year. We are going to be providing students with information about what the laws are in Ontario. Again, believing that when students have accurate and credible information, they will make the best decisions for themselves with that information. So we're going to increase awareness. We're going to be able to provide kind of talk sessions where students can come in and ask questions about cannabis in a safe environment, in a non-judgmental environment. But again, we've been talking about cannabis for the last three and a bit years. So for us, there's not, I know that there tends to be a lot of fear of, oh my God, everybody's going to start smoking pot.
The sky is falling.
And research from Colorado says that's not true. There's the same people are using. The other thing that I always find interesting is that students who weren't using weren't using cannabis, are not using it because it's illegal. Right?
Yes.
That's the legality part is pretty low on the reasons of why they don't use.
Especially here when, like, even though it hasn't been legal, there's still like it's
been pseudo-legalized, right? We know that people who are charged with possession, simple possession, very low. They're not being put through the court systems. Now, again, I recognize that for people of color, people living in poverty, for people who are already in the criminalized system, that is not necessarily the case. But overall, the legalities is not what was stopping people from using. So yeah, we're very much grounded, and I think that's one of the things harm reduction does, is it grounds you. And so then we're not making, as a college, we're not making fear-based decisions. We're not afraid of talking about it. We're not afraid or making decisions from that place of fear.
Yes. That's very powerful, because I think once you open up those avenues of conversation, like, great things can start happening. And that once people are, there's that trust, right? That students trust that you're going to understand and you're going to be able to support them.
And we support students who may be using on a non-medicinal way, but also we support students who are concerned about their friends and family members. And that's all going on whether we talk about it or not.
Absolutely.
But when we talk about it, we're able to support everybody involved.
So what would you say are some, like, have you, sorry, backtrack.
Yeah.
Have you worked outside of a campus setting, like in harm reduction you have, so in the community?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you say are some, like, interesting or unexpected things that you've come across and that you've learned comparing, like, substance use on a campus setting to just at the community, in the community at large?
That's a great question. I'm going to take a second to kind of think about it. So right now I'm involved with a community agency where there's a program for people who have a goal of abstinence. And we also have a program for people who are working with harm reduction. And I actually see a lot of similarities in the sense of there are so little spaces for people to talk about, but what if I'm struggling a little bit? Right? And all of a sudden you open up that space, okay, like, what if you're struggling a little bit? What does that look like? And what do you like about being drunk? Or what do you like about being high? And how does that fit for you? You can get to all these other issues. We know the correlation between mental health and substance use is quite high. And when we're looking at a population, again, that 18 to 24, that's also the highest peak of onset of mental illness. So though I'm working with tends to be an older population in the community agency, it's that space that is so important in being able to help people where they're at.
Yeah. Have you utilized, so I mean, one of the things we know is that peer-to-peer often works really well. So is that something that you do here as well?
Yes, and so I have to say our original peer-to-peer model was a complete disaster. It ended up being very token, and so we scrapped it. Yes, well, and because
you live and you learn.
You live, absolutely, you live and you learn. And so always you want authentic, right? You want to have that authentic involvement and not just token involvement. Where we do have a lot of student peer-to-peer involvement is we work with a child and youth counselor practitioner students. They have a placement. We also work with social service worker students who are on placement. We work with the nursing program who have a community health placement type class. And so we train those students and we have discussions and we meet with them regularly, and they participate in creating services, programs, events for students.
Oh, that's
so
great.
I think I'm cool, but I am nowhere close to as cool as the students I work with. And they're able to come up with ingenious ideas where I can just support them with the content and they go with that. So for example, our rainy days game that's available on our website and is also available to any post-secondary institute who would like to put it on their website. We have no problem sending the link for it. But that was actually created by 2 students. So we provided them the content, they came up with the concepts, and they created the games. So we really believe that that peer-to-peer model is so important and really is key because, you know, students and all of us grew up with the drugs are bad, don't do drugs, just say no. And so adults, we become untrustworthy. And I think that what happens is when we come from a harm reduction place as a campus, as a college, as a post-secondary institution, we're demonstrating to students that we are reliable, that we're providing accurate and honest information. So we're becoming that credible kind of adult in their life, or the ability to create trust between students and the institution.
You know what, I feel like if we were to take away anything from today, like that would be it. So on that note, that was an excellent closing statement.
Excellent.
Thank you so much for chatting with us and sharing your knowledge. So, and if you want to see more videos like this, we cover all kinds of issues about campus mental health. Go to our website at campusmentalhealth.ca and sign up for our newsletter. And feel free to share this video with your coworkers, leave a comment, etc. Thanks for watching.